everyone, and welcome to our presentation about exploring the Nexus. So we're going to talk about public attitudes towards climate change and their impact on international environmental agreement compliance in this Glasgow Science Festival 2024. My name is Dr. Dhouha Kbaier, and I am an active researcher at the Open University. And we have also today
Dr. Ian Kenny, and I'm a PDRA in machine learning applied to climate science, also at the Open University.
Yes, this presentation is part of a big project in open societal challenges that we are working on at the Open University. So we are part of a bigger team. Myself, Dhouha, I am the project leader. Ian, so you are working on the algorithmic development, and maybe you can introduce the rest of the team, Ian.
Richard Fairchild is an academic at the University of Bath who has developed the game-theoretic model which we will introduce. Neil is a neuroeconomist who works also at the University of Bath, who developed the citizen survey we will introduce. And Mark and Laura are members of the team who are developing the research outputs. And in the case of Laura is writing the code for the machine learning output.
Yes. And what I am sharing here is some research cloud keywords that emerged from some discussions between the team members. So you can see what this project is about. So you can see the big keywords that appeared, like climate, environmental, models. We do math. We talk about policymakers. We have agreements. We have influence of citizens, decision making, game theory. So you can see all sorts of different keywords that emerge from discussions between different stakeholders groups. So it goes from non-governmental organizations and policymakers. We had discussion with citizens, but also researchers working in the field in a form of semi-informal workshop. So first of all, we focus on some keywords, but we want to make sure that you understand these keywords. Do you want to go ahead, Ian, with the first one?
So, I'll probably start and explain that the overall project is to use machine learning, which is computational techniques for discovering patterns within data, and join that to something called game theory to produce an overall model. So the machine learning is a computational tool which enables undiscovered patterns to be discovered within existing data sets. And as this slide shows, it's useful for medical image classification, fraud detection, and many other applications.
I can maybe give some simple applications where they might use machine learning. For example, spam detection. Imagine you have an email account, you want to filter out spam emails. So machine learning can help by analyzing lots of emails that are marked as spam or not spam. And based on the patterns it learns, it can then automatically, for example, move new emails into the right folder. You can also probably, if you go and search in Google, sometimes you start typing and then it suggests to you, this is predictive text when you are typing a message on your phone or when you go on a search engine or something. So it's thanks to machine learning because they analyze the words that you have typed before and it can predict what you might want to say next. So maybe we can specify in our context, Ian, how we use it.
So in our context, what we are doing is we took a survey of people's attitudes towards environmental risk and climate change. And then we were trying to predict what the answer for a single question in the survey was for compared with the answers given for the other questions. So what we hope to do by doing that is to allow us to predict what the attitudes of the survey populations were, given their answers to the original questions. This is useful because then we can put the result into the game theoretic model. What you can see on the slide is the way we predict, rather converge to a prediction within the machine learning model.
Yeah. And then the second keyword that we have is game theory for international environmental agreements. So we want to like introduce to you what game theory is. Do you want to go ahead, Ian?
Yep. Okay. So game theory involves the study of interactions between decision makers. Though in game theory, those decision makers need to be assumed to be rational in the sense that you need to assume that they're making a rational decision in all circumstances in which you're operating the game. So just to explain here that game theory does not mean playing a game as you'd normally understand it. What game theory does is model the interactions between individuals or actors in a context which can be seen as a game where both or all participants are trying to find the best outcome for each of the other participants and themselves. This can be viewed as a tree structure, as you can see on the graph, where people are or actors in the game are making decisions based on probabilities to go down the tree.
Yeah, for example, if you think of auction, in an auction, you have different bidders that compete to win an item. So then each bidder has to decide how much they are willing to pay. And if you think of that probability, if I pay this or that, then I will have this option or that option, then game theory helps the bidder determine their optimal bidding strategies based on the predictions of how others will bid. It's the same in businesses. If you look at companies, they often use game theory to make strategic decisions. For example, when they set the prices for their products, they consider how competitors might react. So if one company lowers its prices, will others follow, or will they hold their prices steady? So game theory helps businesses anticipate and respond to competitive moves. So this is another example. In our context, Ian.
So in that, as Dhouha just said, in our context, we use game theory to model the interactions between international governments and political bodies. So what we've done, actually Richard has done, is create a mathematical model which is has many variables in it to model the interactions between countries. So if you consider two countries, how their impetus to reduce pollution is influenced by the actions of other countries and their population attitudes and their political biases. The interaction then carries over between the two countries. So the key point here is that we're modeling the country's own intrinsic motivation to reduce pollution and the extrinsic influence on the country's continuing willingness to reduced population.
Yes. And this now brings, our vision together. So we will put all the pieces together. Is what we focus on is how can machine learning and game theory help us to understand the incentive for governments and nations to form the international environmental agreements in the first place, and also to adhere to these agreements over the long term when there are individual incentive to renege and free ride. So do you want to carry on, Ian, about the two next questions? So the research questions.
What we did was we asked two research questions. The first of which was, what do the models tell us about the large number of failures within the existing IEAs? And the second one is how can these models allow us to build a stronger and more stable IEA in the future. The aim overall to integrate the game theoretic model with the machine learning approach is to use a collective intelligence inspired approach to integrate the two models. So briefly, collective intelligence is the idea that people's decision making is influenced by other people's decision making within the group that they are interacting with, either socially at an international level or indeed a national level.
Yeah, so I will take the next slide 9, Ian, yeah, and then you can take slide 10 after that.
Okay.
So the idea so that we've been working on. So first of all, the objective was to model the interactions between population attitudes to environmental issues and risks and the countries' propensity to comply with the international environmental agreement that they have signed up to. So what we focus on is the relationship between governmental policy, population attitudes, compliance with international environmental agreements. So how we get to that relationship is that we need to collect data, and we try to collect data via two avenues: surveys, which is asking the public, but also running workshops where we bring the different stakeholders and where we discuss with them how we build the modules and how we can improve it. So this is what the next step is, to gather the relevant data on population attitudes and the compliance level. And the methodology is to model the relationship between the population attitudes and compliance with international environmental agreement. And then I give you, to discuss this slide, Ian, about the impact of our research.
So this slide presents a pictorial summary, if you like, of what we are intending the impact of research to be. So we want to present to policymakers the model and its benefits to bring planning and understanding of the changing attitudes of the population towards climate change. This is actually key because there is currently not a well understood way of representing the changing attitudes of populations to climate change in order to keep the pressure on governments to act within an IEA agreement. So we also wanted to produce an impact on the intergovernmental and governmental bodies to make them realize that the attitudes of the population are important, and these are represented by the results from the model. So moving on, this was the ultimate aim, was to introduce a new tool such that we can introduce a way in which changing attitudes can be represented over time. So we have a continuing rolling model which enables the effect of changing attitudes within the population to be expressed within the game-theoretic model. So we also want to demonstrate the benefits of mathematical models in determining the influences on policy making and demonstrate the attitudes of how citizens can influence and interact with, between themselves, other citizens, and public opinion towards governmental policies. The ultimate aim is therefore to produce a deeper informed understanding of public attitudes towards environmental risk and climate change. Yep.
So what we did is asking you. So we carried out an online survey of people's attitudes toward environmental risk, and we asked a series of questions about your attitudes to the environment, in addition to various lifestyle and social factors, and we analyzed what factors were significant in their attitudes towards whether environment is important to them. So we predict how individuals influence national level policy on environmental action. So the machine learning and game theory models, machine learning was model based on predicting. We took a question response and then we predict that question response from the other questions in the survey. And we developed equations. So as we said, our colleagues from Bath University, especially Richard Fairchild, has been working on developing the game theoretic equations. We are not displaying these equations to you here, but I try to explain the factors and the parameters that were incorporated in these equations. So we introduced the global pollution. We introduced the global pollution without any mitigation efforts by either nation. We have the slope of the effort that countries are putting in order to mitigate climate change, the ability to reduce the pollution parameter. We have introduced another parameter for the effort cost for cleaning up pollution, but also the nation's economic welfare without any mitigation efforts. And what Ian mentioned earlier is the extrinsic motivation driven by citizens, and the intrinsic motivation, as well as the obligation or the duty to the international environmental agreement. Do you want to add anything here, Ian? Because I think we are concluding the presentation.
I think you've covered it very well, Dhouha.
Yes. We try to avoid displaying the equations and just explaining to you the important factors that were taken into account in the maths models from the surveys where we gathered the data. So thank you very much for listening to our presentation, and we are just an email away. So if you would like to send us any emails, or please, you can tag us either via LinkedIn. We have both an account on LinkedIn. This is really welcome. If you'd like to ask any further questions, do not hesitate to get in touch. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.